My mother-in-law tried to redecorate my life until they stole my architecture designs and walked into a catastrophic safety trap. I always believed that hospitality was a virtue, a way to build bridges with the people who mattered most to the man I loved. When my husband, Austin, begged me to let his mother and sister move into our guest cottage for just a few months to get back on their feet, I pushed aside my reservations and opened our doors. I expected a few minor disagreements over kitchen space or noise levels, the typical friction that comes with blended households. What I never could have anticipated was the systematic, cold-blooded takeover of my life, my home, and my career. They didn't just want a place to stay. They wanted everything I had spent a decade building. And the worst part? The man who promised to protect me was holding the door open for them. But they underestimated one crucial detail. I own the foundation they are trying to stand on. The morning the moving truck arrived, the sky was a bruised, heavy gray, threatening a downpour that matched the uneasy knot tightening in my stomach. I stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of our living room, wrapping my hands around a mug of black coffee just to feel its warmth. Our house, a mid-century modern build nestled on a quiet acre of land just outside the city, was my sanctuary. I had designed every corner of it myself, balancing clean architectural lines with warm, textured fabrics. It was the physical manifestation of my success as an independent interior architect. Every tile, every custom white oak cabinet represented late nights, difficult clients, and years of disciplined saving. Austin stepped up behind me, sliding his arms around my waist and resting his chin on my shoulder. He smelled of cedar wood and the expensive shaving cream I bought him for his birthday. "They're just going to need a little time to adjust, Paige," he murmured, his breath warm against my neck. My mother has had a rough couple of years since the divorce, and Brooke just needs a stable environment to figure out her next career move. "You're an angel for doing this." "I just want boundaries, Austin," I said, turning slightly in his embrace to look into his hazel eyes. "The guest cottage is fully self-contained. It has its own kitchen, its own laundry. I need my space to work. My clients expect me to be focused when I'm designing from home." "Of course, absolutely," he promised, kissing my forehead. His smile was reassuring, the same stable, comforting smile that had drawn me to him 3 years ago when we met at a charity gala. Austin was an accountant, methodical, cautious, and practical. Or so I thought. By noon, the tranquility of our property was entirely shattered. My mother-in-law, Lydia, did not arrive like a woman down on her luck. She arrived like a displaced monarch. She stepped out of her sedan wearing a pristine cream trench coat, her perfectly coiffed blonde hair defying the damp wind. Behind her came Brooke, Austin's 24-year-old sister, trailing a cloud of heavy perfume and glued to her smartphone. Instead of directing the movers toward the detached cottage at the back of the property, Lydia marched straight up our front steps, pushing past me without a greeting. She stood in the center of my living room, her eyes sweeping over my minimalist decor with a look of profound pity. "Well," Lydia sighed, tapping a manicured fingernail against the sleek, matte black console table, "it's very sterile, isn't it?" "Don't worry, darling. Now that I'm here, we can add some warmth to this place. A few traditional Persian rugs, perhaps some heavier drapes. It looks like an upscale dentist's waiting room right now." I tightened my grip on my coffee mug, forcing a polite smile. "Welcome, Lydia. The movers are actually supposed to take those boxes down the gravel path to the cottage. That's where your things will be going." Lydia blinked at me, her expression shifting instantly into one of fragile hurt. She looked over her shoulder at Austin, who was busy carrying a large box of books. "Austin, dearest, surely your wife doesn't expect me to live in the servants' quarters immediately." After that long drive, I thought we might have lunch in the main house and discuss how we're going to manage the living arrangements. "It's not the servants' quarters." "Mother," Austin said quickly, setting the box down and shooting me a pleading look. "It's a fully renovated 2-bedroom guest house. But of course, come sit down." Paige made some chicken salad. That lunch set the tone for the weeks to follow. Every conversation was a passive-aggressive critique masked as maternal concern. Lydia commented on the lack of starch in Austin's shirts, the fact that I didn't cook hot meals every single night, and the unfortunate choice of modern art on our walls. Brooke, meanwhile, treated our main house like a luxury resort. She would lounge by our pool for hours, leaving wet towels on the custom teak decking, and helped herself to the contents of our pantry without asking. I tried to talk to Austin about it, but his response was always the same. "They've been through a lot, Paige. Just let it slide for my sake. Family accommodates family." The real trouble began a month into their stay. I was working on a massive commercial project, the redesign of a boutique hotel downtown. It was the biggest contract of my career, one that could elevate my firm to a national level. My home office was filled with fabric swatches, blueprints, and material samples. I had a strict rule that no one was to enter my workspace without permission. One Tuesday afternoon, I returned home early from a site visit to find the front door unlocked. A strange metallic scraping sound was echoing from the dining room. Walking in, my heart dropped into my throat. Lydia was standing on a step stool, wielding a screwdriver. She had completely removed my custom-made, hand-blown glass chandelier, a piece I had imported from Murano, Italy, and had replaced it with a heavy, ornate brass monstrosity covered in faux crystal drops. Brooke was sitting at the dining table, casually painting her nails on top of my unprotected walnut table, a bottle of acetone sitting dangerously close to the wood's finish. "What are you doing?" The words left my mouth before I could stop them, my voice trembling with a mixture of shock and fury. Lydia turned around, wiping her hands on a rag with an air of immense satisfaction. "Oh, Paige, you're back early. I found this gorgeous antique fixture at an estate sale down the road. It brings so much character to this dreary room, don't you think?" The other one looked like a collection of test tubes. "You took down my light fixture," I said, walking over and snatching the acetone bottle away from Brooke, who merely rolled her eyes. "You altered my house, without asking me." "It's Austin's house too, darling," Lydia said smoothly, stepping down from the stool. "And as his mother, I have a right to ensure he lives in a home that reflects his status. Besides, you're always so busy with your little drawings that you neglect the aesthetics of your own household. Get out," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Both of you. Go back to the cottage. Now." Lydia's eyes narrowed, the mask of maternal kindness slipping for a fraction of a second to reveal something incredibly cold. "You have a very ugly temper, Paige. I see Austin has been far too indulgent with you." When Austin came home that evening, I expected him to be as outraged as I was. Instead, I walked into the living room to find him sitting on the sofa with his mother, who was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue while Brooke whispered fiercely in his ear. "Paige, how could you speak to my mother that way?" Austin demanded, standing up as I entered. "She was just trying to do something nice for us. She spent her own money to improve the dining room. She vandalized my design, Austin," I exclaimed, gesturing wildly toward the dining room. "She had no right to touch anything in this house. And your sister is ruining my furniture." "This is my home. It's our home," Austin corrected me, his tone sharper than it had ever been in our 3 years together. "And honestly, Paige, you've been incredibly unwelcoming since they got here. You treat them like intruders instead of my family. My mother is fragile right now. I won't have you screaming at her." I stared at him, feeling a sudden, chilling sense of vertigo. This wasn't the supportive man I married. It was as if a switch had been flipped the moment his family moved onto our property. Over the next 2 weeks, the atmosphere in the house grew suffocatingly tense. I began locking my office door whenever I left the house, carrying the key with me everywhere. I threw myself into my work for the hotel project, finding solace in the cold, logical lines of my blueprints. But then, the final straw arrived. I received an email from the hotel's board of directors requesting an emergency meeting. When I arrived at their corporate headquarters, the lead developer, a man named Marcus, whom I had known for years, looked incredibly uncomfortable. He laid a printed document across the boardroom table. "Paige, we received this yesterday evening," Marcus said quietly. "It's a competing bid for the hotel interior design package. The layout, the sourcing list, and the color palettes are almost identical to the pitch you gave us last month. But the bidding firm is offering to do the work for half your fee." I leaned forward, looking at the name of the competing firm printed at the top of the page. Apex Design Consultants. "I've never heard of this firm," I stammered, my mind racing. "Marcus, this is my proprietary work. These are my exact concepts." "Who registered this company?" Marcus sighed, sliding a copy of the corporate registration documents across the table. My eyes scanned the page, stopping dead on the names of the managing partners. Brooke Vance, Lydia Vance. My blood ran completely cold. I sat back in the leather chair, the room spinning around me. Brooke didn't know the first thing about interior design. She had spent the last month sunbathing. They had stolen my digital files. But how? My office was locked. The files were password protected on my desktop computer, unless someone had given them the key. Someone who knew my passwords. I thanked Marcus, grabbed the documents, and drove home in a state of absolute icy calm. The confusion and hurt had evaporated, replaced by a searing crystalline clarity. I parked my car, walked up the steps, and unlocked the front door. As I stepped into the foyer, I could hear laughter coming from Austin's study. I walked down the hallway and pushed the door open. Austin was sitting at his desk with Lydia and Brooke standing on either side of him, staring at his computer screen. On the monitor was my personal banking portal, showing the balance of my business's primary operating account. Austin looked up, his face pale with sudden guilt, while Lydia's lips curved into a triumphant, mocking smile. The silence in the study was absolute, heavy with the sudden, suffocating realization that they had been caught red-handed. Austin frozen with his hand still hovering over the mouse, his jaw slightly slack. Lydia's smug grin vanished, replaced instantly by a tight defensive mask, while Brooke scrambled to step back from the desk, her eyes darting to the floor as if she could disappear into the hardwood. I stepped fully into the room, closing the door behind me with a soft, deliberate click. I didn't scream. I didn't slam my purse down or demand explanations. The betrayal was so absolute, so entirely devoid of decency, that it transcended anger. It required cold, calculated precision. Paige? Austin began, his voice cracking slightly as he quickly clicked away from the banking screen, frantically trying to open a blank spreadsheet to cover his tracks. It's not what it looks like. I was just helping my mother look at some financial formatting models. We weren't looking at your accounts. Get off my computer, Austin, I said, my voice dangerously calm, devoid of any emotional inflection. He hesitated, looking up at his mother for guidance. Lydia sneered, recovering her composure with terrifying speed. She smoothed down her designer trousers and stepped in front of her son's desk, adopting her familiar posture of matriarchal authority. Oh, stop the dramatic theatrics, Paige. Lydia scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. There is no need for this ridiculous hostility. We are a family now. What is yours is Austin's. And what is Austin's belongs to this family. You have been hoarding your business assets while my daughter struggles to find her footing. We simply leveled the playing field by stealing my architectural blueprints, by copying my exact pitch for the downtown boutique hotel, and submitting it under a shell company called Apex Design Consultants. I walked over to the desk, tossing the corporate documents Marcus had given me directly onto the keyboard. You didn't level the playing field, Lydia. You committed corporate espionage and grand larceny. Brooke piped up from the corner, her voice dripping with artificial innocence. It's not stealing if Austin gave us the password, Paige. He's an equitable owner of this household. He had every right to share the network keys with us. I turned my gaze to Austin. He wouldn't look at me. His eyes were glued to the corporate registration papers on his desk, his fingers twitching against his knees. Is that true, Austin? I asked softly. You took the key to my office from my dresser? You logged into my encrypted hard drive while I was at a project site and downloaded my entire portfolio for them? You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Austin burst out suddenly, his face flushing a deep, angry crimson as he finally looked up. My mother lost everything in the divorce because of my father's hidden debts. Brooke can't find a job in this market. You're sitting on a massive 6-figure contract with the hotel board, and you won't even hire your own sister-in-law as an assistant. I had to take matters into my own hands. We're going to run Apex together. With your designs, we can secure the contract, and the profits will stay in the family. You'll still be taken care of, Paige. It's just business. It's my business, I replied, staring at the stranger I had married. And it's over. Without another word, I turned on my heel and walked out of the room. Austin shouted after me, his footsteps echoing down the hallway as he tried to follow me, but I didn't stop until I reached my vehicle. I locked the doors, started the engine, and drove away from the property, leaving him standing in the driveway, shouting into the damp afternoon air. I didn't cry. The tears wouldn't come. Instead, my mind functioned with the rapid, mechanical efficiency of a computer processing data. I drove straight to the downtown office of my corporate attorney, an incredibly sharp woman named Vanessa who had handled my business formations since day one. When I laid out the documents, the timeline, and the revelation of Austin's involvement, Vanessa didn't look shocked. She looked entirely focused. She adjusted her glasses, reviewing the corporate registry for Apex Design Consultants. They're amateurs, Paige, Vanessa said, tapping her pen against the document. Lydia and Brooke registered this entity using their real names, and they used your husband's personal tablet to submit the filings, which means the IP address points directly back to your residence. More importantly, we need to address the structural ownership of your firm, Vanguard Architecture. Austin is not a partner, I stated firmly. I established the LLC 4 years before we met. We signed a strict prenuptial agreement that explicitly categorized my business, its intellectual property, and all future earnings from the firm as separate property. Vanessa smiled, a slow, reassuring expression, which means your husband has zero legal claim to your designs. What he did by providing your password-protected files to a competing entity is a clear violation of trade secret laws, and it borders on computer fraud. We can file an emergency injunction to halt their bid with the hotel board immediately. No, I said, a sudden, brilliant plan beginning to take shape in my mind. Don't file the injunction yet. If we stop them now, Lydia and Brooke will just pull back, lie their way out of it. And Austin will find another way to siphon money from our joint household accounts before I can legally detach myself from him. What are you thinking, Paige? Vanessa asked, leaning forward, intrigued. They think they have my complete design package, I explained, a cold smile touching my lips. But what they downloaded from my backup drive was the preliminary Phase 1 draft from 3 months ago. I made massive structural and zoning revisions to the final blueprint last week because the historical city codes wouldn't approve the load-bearing columns in the main lobby. If they submit that stolen draft as their final bid, the project will be fundamentally unbuildable, and they will violate city safety compliance laws the moment it's reviewed by the municipal engineers. And what about your husband? I want a full forensic audit of our personal joint accounts, our mortgage documents, and the deed to the property, I said, my voice hardening. I want to know exactly how deep his hand has been in my pockets. Over the next 48 hours, I stayed at a quiet boutique hotel downtown, working around the clock with Vanessa and a forensic accountant. The findings were worse than I could have imagined, but they provided the exact leverage I needed. Austin hadn't just given his family my designs. Over the past 6 months, he had forged my signature to take out a secondary equity line of credit on our modern home, a home that my parents had gifted to me before our marriage, which was also protected under our prenuptial agreement. He had used that money to fund Lydia's lavish lifestyle and pay off Brooke's mounting credit card debts. He had compromised the foundation of our life, assuming I would never look closely enough at the statements to notice. On Thursday morning, I received a text message from Marcus at the Hotel Development Board. Paige, Apex Design Consultants just officially submitted their finalized binding contract bid. They underbid you by 40%. The board is meeting at noon to finalize the selection. I am so sorry, but unless you can match their price, the stakeholders are going to vote for Apex. I smiled at my phone, typing out a quick response. Don't be sorry, Marcus. I'll see you at noon. Please ensure the city building inspector is present for the presentation. I adjusted my tailored blazer, grabbed my leather portfolio containing the forensic financial reports and the corrected architectural blueprints, and walked out of the hotel room. It was time to attend the meeting my in-laws thought would change their lives forever. The boardroom on the top floor of the hotel development headquarters was bathed in midday light, reflecting off the polished mahogany table and the sleek glass panels overlooking the city skyline. When I arrived, the atmosphere was already thick with corporate anticipation. Sitting on the left side of the long table were Lydia and Brooke, dressed in brand new expensive designer suits that I knew, with sickening certainty, had been financed by the fraudulent line of credit Austin had taken out against my house. Austin sat just behind them, acting as their financial advisor, holding a leather briefcase and looking incredibly self-important. Marcus, the lead developer, sat at the head of the table surrounded by 5 other board members and Mr. Henderson, the chief municipal building inspector for the city. As I walked into the room, the collective breath seemed to catch. Austin's face instantly flushed a guilty, blotchy red, while Lydia's posture stiffened. Brooke, however, couldn't resist a smug, condescending smirk. She leaned back in her chair, twirling an expensive pen between her fingers. "Paige," Marcus said, his voice laced with professional awkwardness. "Thank you for coming. As I mentioned, Apex Design Consultants has submitted a highly competitive bid for the interior architecture package. Given the identical nature of the design concepts, the board is heavily leaning toward their proposal due to the massive cost savings." "I understand, Marcus," I said smoothly, taking my seat at the opposite side of the table and placing my leather portfolio flat on the wood surface. "But before the board casts a binding vote, I believe it is imperative that we conduct a thorough compliance review of the structural draft submitted by Apex." Lydia stood up, her voice sharp and dripping with feigned indignation. "Marcus, this is completely highly irregular. Paige is simply a disgruntled competitor who cannot accept that her monopoly on this project has been broken. My daughter and I spent weeks perfecting those layouts. We do not need to be cross-examined by someone who is clearly bitter about losing a fair market bid. If your designs are truly yours, Lydia, then you should have absolutely no problem explaining the load-bearing calculations to Mr. Henderson here," I replied, nodding toward the city inspector. Mr. Henderson adjusted his glasses, pulling up the digital files Apex had submitted onto the massive presentation screen on the wall. "Actually, Mrs. Vance, Ms. Page raised some serious safety concerns this morning. Let's look at the blueprint your firm submitted for the primary structural lobby and the mezzanine level." I watched Brooke's smile falter as the stolen Phase 1 blueprint flashed onto the screen. It was beautiful, yes, but it was the unrevised draft, the one containing the critical structural flaws I had corrected after analyzing the historical city codes. "Now, Ms. Brooke," Mr. Henderson continued, leaning forward, "according to these specifications, you have placed a massive 3-ton indoor waterfall fixture directly over the secondary support beam on the mezzanine. Can you explain to the board how you plan to reinforce that beam without violating the Municipal Historical Preservation Code, Section 44. Brooke blinked rapidly, her face going entirely blank. She looked frantically at the blueprint, then down at her notes, her hands beginning to tremble. Well, we plan to use high-grade steel brackets and, heavy-duty concrete pouring. The Historical Preservation Code strictly prohibits structural concrete pouring on that specific subfloor. Ms. Brooke, Mr. Henderson said, his voice dropping into a stern, authoritative tone. Furthermore, looking at the column placement in this main entrance layout, you have completely omitted the load-bearing reinforcement for the western wall. If this design were actually constructed, the mezzanine would suffer a catastrophic structural failure within months. This isn't just an amateur mistake. This is a severe violation of safety regulations. The boardroom erupted into frantic whispering among the stakeholders. Marcus looked furious, his gaze shifting from the screen directly to Lydia and Brooke. "This is absurd," Lydia sputtered, her voice rising an octave as she pointed an accusing finger at me. "She's setting us up. This is a minor formatting error." "It's not an error, Lydia. It's theft," I said loudly, silencing the room. I opened my portfolio, sliding several copies of Vanessa's prepared legal documents across the table to Marcus and the board members. "The reason Apex Design Consultants has a flawed, unbuildable draft is because they stole it from my private business server. Included in those packets are the forensic digital footprints showing that these exact files were downloaded via an unauthorized network key belonging to my husband, Austin, who acts as the financial manager for Apex." Austin stood up so fast his chair scraped violently against the floor. "Paige, stop this right now. You're ruining everything." "No, Austin. You ruined everything the moment you forged my signature," I said, looking him dead in the eye. I pulled out the secondary document, the forensic accounting report. "Marcus, gentlemen, I have already filed a formal emergency injunction for copyright infringement and trade secret theft against Apex Design Consultants. But more importantly, Mr. Henderson, I have provided your office with the full documentation showing that this firm knowingly submitted fraudulent, non-compliant architectural designs to a municipal board." Marcus slammed his hand on the table, standing up. "The bid from Apex is officially disqualified and voided. Furthermore, our legal counsel will be cooperating fully with any investigation regarding intellectual property theft. Get out of our boardroom now." Lydia looked as though she might faint, her face a pasty, sickly white as she grabbed her designer purse. Brooke looked terrified, finally realizing that her dreams of becoming a wealthy design mogul were completely dead, but I wasn't finished. As Austin hurried toward the door to follow his mother and sister, I called out his name. "Austin? Wait," I said, standing up. He turned around, a desperate, pathetic glint of hope in his eyes, likely thinking I was going to offer him a lifeline. I handed him a heavy manila envelope. "These are divorce papers, and that is a copy of the criminal complaint for grand larceny and forgery regarding the fraudulent equity line of credit you took out on my separate property." He dropped his briefcase, the leather hitting the carpet with a dull thud. "Paige, please, we can talk about this. I did it for us, for our future." "My future doesn't include a thief," I said coldly. "The locks on the main house have already been changed. The sheriff's department is currently at our property serving your mother and sister with an immediate eviction notice for the guest cottage. Your things are being packed into boxes and placed on the curb as we speak." Austin stared at me, his lip trembling as the absolute finality of his ruin settled over him. He had gambled my life's work to fund his family's entitlement, and in doing so, he had lost absolutely everything. 2 months later, the dust had finally settled. The board of directors officially awarded Vanguard Architecture the full, unrestricted contract for the boutique hotel, with a significantly increased budget for my trouble. Lydia and Brooke were forced to dissolve their fraudulent company and are currently facing massive civil penalties for copyright infringement, while Brooke's credit rating is completely destroyed. Austin is currently living in a cramped, one-bedroom apartment with his mother and sister, awaiting his formal court date for the financial fraud charges. As for me, I sit in my quiet, beautifully designed modern living room, the Murano glass chandelier casting a warm, brilliant glow over the walnut table. The house is peaceful again, the air is clear, and I finally have the space to create my own future, built on a foundation that no one can ever steal again.